cavity's a mystery yet. He's called the hidden paw, for he's the master criminal who can defy the law. He's the bafflement of Scotland Yard, the flying squad's despair. For when they reach the scene of crime, the cavity's not there. McCavity, there's no one like McCavity. He's broken every human law. He breaks the law of gravity. His powers of levitation would make a fakir stare. And when you reach the scene of crime, McCavity's not there. You may seek him in the basement. You may look up in the air. But I tell you once and once again, McCavity is not there! McCavity is a ginger cat. He's very tall and thin. You would know him if you saw him, for his eyes are sunken in. His brow is deeply lined with thought. His head is highly domed. His coat is dusty from neglect. His whiskers are uncombed. He sways his head from side to side with movements like a snake. And when you think he's half asleep, he's always wide awake! McCavity, McCavity, there's no one like McCavity. For he's a fiend in feline shape, a monster of depravity. You may meet him in a by street. You may see him in the square. Then McCavity's not there. He's outwardly respectable. I know he cheats at cards, and his footprints are not found in any files of Scotland Yards.
Hello, I'm John Coleman from ApocatastasisInstitute, an Institute for the Humanities and Alternative College and High School here on New Milford, Connecticut, USA. The purpose of this broadcast is to get up to date. This 7th of February, 2026, on News of the World. This time, as always, each time, joined by Dr. James Fetzer. And we're going to get into all sorts of things, China, Epstein, and who knows where our time ahead will take us. Before we get caught up with Dr. Fetzer and indeed world news, just one announcement concerning Apocatastasis, and that is this month of February, I have lately released a free book, really, 150 odd pages, maybe 180 odd pages, on piety. Piety, not as a religious focus, but piety as the classical world would have known it. Piety meaning devotion to our families and our homeland, and how schools can assist in this. And, well, I got typing about a year ago, and I finally finished it, so people can freely download that, along with Dr. Fetzer's sites, which I'll be cycling through with the bubbles and things, and they're down below as well. You will also be able just to click on the link and freely download, and more importantly, read that text. With that being said, please unmute Dr. Fetzer. Welcome, and let us know how you've been, and we'll get going here.
Oh, thanks, John. Yeah. We actually had a 38-degree day today, so the snow's melting. A lot going on out there in the world, of course, including an enormous response to the release of the 3 million pages of the Epstein file, which is creating outrage from every decent human being on planet Earth, John. This is absolutely stunning stuff. And I think it marks an awakening, and that it's very much like The Charlie Kirk shooting, which I'm convinced was staged, but most people believe to have been real, generated a reevaluation of Israel. Here, it's going even deeper and is more profound in its implications, because this grotesque abuse of children is offensive to every person with a decent bone in their body. And it's just overwhelming in its decadence, its corruption, and its inhumanity to man. I mean, one measure of the morality of a society is how it treats its children. And in this case, we have a group of Luciferians who are treating them as disposable entities. It's outrageous, John. So I think this is a very important development, given all this has been going on behind the scene. Having exposed out in public fashion forces everyone to confront the bottom line here. And it's so obviously repulsive and unacceptable. I'm hoping it will bring about profound changes in our society and its attitude toward acts of this kind.
Thank you for that, Dr. Fetzer. And by the way, the bumper music for the audience was from T.S. Eliot's adaptation on Broadway, Cats, Macavity the Mystery Cat. And there was a very special reason I played that as the bumper before Dr. Fetzer joined us. And in the course of our time together, or perhaps at the end of the recording, I'm going to ask Dr. Fetzer, pick his mind, because I have a thought about Jeffrey Epstein that I haven't heard come up, and it has to do with a certain aspect that poem brings up. But anyway, Dr. Fetzer, please proceed.
Oh, excellent, John. Well, we've had all the plans for the strike on Iran. We have known it was coming. We had predictions that it was going to take place within 72 hours. It would have been last Friday, John, coinciding with the release of the Epstein files. And I believe the war was intended to be a distraction. So I was going to suppress. There'd be so much news about Iran and the war that hardly anyone would have time to bother with these millions of pages from the Epstein files. But it didn't play out that way. Here we have the Truth Seeker reporting military strike on Iran now virtually certain. Western source says decision-making circles in the U.S. and Israel have moved past diplomacy with Iran, viewing military action as effectively decided, with only the timing still under debate. A Western source familiar with the coordination talks told Iran International. And there, of course, you got a B-2 bomber.
According to the source, the key question in current meetings is no longer whether an attack will take place, but when an appropriate operational and political window will emerge. A window that could open in the coming days or take shape over the course of several weeks. The source emphasized that at this stage, the logic being discussed, unlike in previous periods, is not based on quote-unquote reaching a new agreement. U.S. President Donald Trump said on Thursday he planned to speak with Iran, even as he sent another warship to the Middle East, and the Pentagon chief said the military would be ready to carry out whatever the president decided. And Dr. Fetzer, could you mute just for the sake of audio, please? Thank you. Iran, however, says it will not engage in negotiations unless President Trump stops threatening it. The source told Iran International that recent assessments identify the primary objective, delivering a decisive blow to maximally weaken and ultimately collapse Iran's governing structure. A scenario that, in his words, is not comparable in scale or intensity to anything Iran has experienced so far. The source said the operation under discussion would be, quote unquote, unprecedented, stressing, quote, this time we will be facing an attack the likes of which we have not seen before, unquote.
According to the source, Joint U.S.-Israeli discussions have also concluded that current conditions for action differ from the past. He said decision makers believe the present situation has created a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity that, as a result, willingness to accept risk compared with the 12-day war has increased markedly. The source said that during the 12-day war last June, both Washington and Tel Aviv avoided taking greater risks, but the prevailing view now is that the current moment must be seized. In June, Israel launched a surprise military offensive against Iran, followed by U.S. strikes on June 22nd, targeting key nuclear facilities in Isfahan, Natanz, and Fordow. The attacks were launched when Iran failed to reach an agreement with the United States within a 60-day deadline set by Trump. The U.S. president said on Friday that he had directly communicated a deadline to Iran for reaching a deal, but offered no further details. Could Trump bomb Iran before settling on a rationale? Even the shifting justification could be resolved with diplomacy. Shifting justification for a war are never a good sign, and they strongly suggest the war in question was not warranted. In the Vietnam War, the principal public rationale of saving South Vietnam from communism got replaced in the minds of the war makers, especially after losing hope of winning the contest in Vietnam, by the belief that the United States had to keep fighting to preserve its credibility. In the Iraq War, when President George W. Bush's pre-war argument about weapons of mass destruction fell apart, he shifted to a rationale centered on bringing freedom and democracy to Iraq. Now, with President Donald Trump threatening a new armed attack on Iran amidst a buildup of U.S. forces in the region, the Washington Post headline writers aptly described the rationale for any such attack as being in flux. And for the online version of the same article asked, what's the mission? A related question about the latest threat to attack Iran is why now? The initial peg for Trump talking up the subject during the past month was a mass protest in Iran that began at Tehran's Grand Bazaar in late December and rapidly spread through Iranian cities during the next couple of weeks. Trump urged Iranians to keep protesting and promised help is on the way. Rhetoric that led to widespread expectations, not least of all inside Iran, that U.S. military action was imminent. No such action materialized. Perhaps a valid reason it did not is the difficulty of identifying targets for military attack that would be more likely to help the protesters than hurt them. If a regime is gunning down innocent citizens in the street, there is no target that an outside military power can devise that would distinguish the gunners from the innocents on the street. Meanwhile, we have an excellent report here. Let's take a look.
Hello, it's your friend CJ Wellerman, and in this episode, we look at China's vow to counter American and Israeli aggression around the world. But first, please remember to like and subscribe to our show, and don't forget to turn on notifications so you never miss a single episode. Now let's get into it. In a recent tweet, I asked whether Trump's invasion of Venezuela lit a match for a US-China war, given Beijing was the South American country's #1 oil customer. A move that puts the United States in almost total control over the world's oil reserves, given the US effectively rules the Persian Gulf and Red Sea through its Arab and Zionist puppet regimes. This has caused China's energy anxiety to spike upwards, remembering that more than 50% of its oil and gas imports come from US allies in the Middle East, making Beijing feel completely boxed in by American-Israeli aggression and imperialism, which is why Beijing is vowing retaliation against any country that supports US efforts to isolate China economically.
The United States has brazenly resorted to the use of force against Venezuela and demanded that America First be applied when Venezuela disposes of its own oil resources. This is a typical act of bullying, a serious violation of international law, and a grave infringement on Venezuela's sovereignty that also severely undermines the rights of Venezuelan people. China strongly condemns this.
They say those who forget the past are doomed to repeat it, a warning that the Zionist-American alliance seems determined to ignore. Call it arrogance, call it hubris, call it whatever you want. But similar moves against Japan in the 1930s ignited the Second World War in the Western Pacific.
Why did Japan attack Pearl Harbor? U.S. oil embargo. The U.S. cut off Japan's access to oil, steel, and other resources in response to Japan's invasion of China and expansion in Asia. Japan needed these resources for its military. Expansion goals. Japan wanted to dominate Asia and the Pacific, the Greater East Asia co-prosperity sphere, without U.S. interference.
China opposes use of force in international relations, but it also stated that it will not hesitate to deploy its military power if its strategic interests are directly threatened. But for now, it's using its power and influence to launch a campaign to expel Israel from the United Nations. Put simply, Israel and the United States are fooling themselves if they don't believe Beijing won't retaliate for toppling the Iranian regime, which provides China with more than 80% of its shipped oil, therefore making US Israeli-led regime change efforts in Iran an existential threat to the Chinese economy, leaving Beijing with no other choice than to send weapons and missile defense systems to Tehran. Nothing I'm saying here should be misinterpreted as tacit support for the Chinese government, because not only has its foreign ministry threatened me in public, calling me an anti-China propagandist, but also it has targeted me and my family with threats and harassment in retaliation for exposing evidence of China's criminal abuse of Uyghur Muslims throughout its network of concentration camps in Xinjiang. So, when I talk about China or the United States, I'm merely calling balls and strikes. And the state of the game is this. Beijing has reached breaking point over the unrestrained military aggression of the United States and Israel during the past 2 years.
Since the start of the current Gaza conflict, the Palestinian people have been deeply mired in suffering. Lebanon, Syria, Yemen, Iran, among others, are witnessing escalating tensions, and even Qatar has come under attack. The mounting conflicts and volatility in the Middle East have worsened the global security environment, dampened the economic outlook for the world, and ran counter to the common interests of the international community. It is there.
To counter Zionist expansionism, which is underwritten by American firepower, China is not only calling for the arrest of Netanyahu and rallying international support against the US-Israeli alliance, but also quietly transferring its latest weapons technologies to Tehran, specifically those that improve the Persian state's air defense capabilities. As per its recent acquisition of China's HQ-9B surface-to-air defense system, which came just days after Israeli and American warplanes bombed Iranian nuclear sites in June of last year, marking a massive turning point in Iran's post-war air defense strategy. This has far-reaching implications for Israel, the United States, and the evolving balance of power in the Middle East.
Now to the topic. China's air defense system threatens to take down Israeli aircraft without even being detected on radar. It combines features from Russia's S-400 and America's Patriot system, with the addition of some seriously advanced Chinese tech. It's the only system in the world capable of enforcing an airspace lockdown that's nearly impossible to breach. It has ultra-fast, super-accurate radars. Netanyahu himself is worried about his jets flying anywhere near its range. Planes that can avoid radar detection still get hit by its missiles, and survival chances are basically zero.
China giving Iran the tools to knock American F-35s and Israeli F-15s out of the sky is why Trump and Netanyahu called off their planned attack against Iran in early January. Israeli and American attack plans received another blow on the 20th of January when 16 Chinese military cargo planes were reported to have landed in Iran during a 56-hour period, which was preceded by the arrival of another cargo plane in Tehran just 4 days earlier.
Just 3 days, not one, not two. 16 military cargo aircrafts are reported to have landed in Iran. Not commercial planes here, not humanitarian flights, heavy military transports, and here's the detail that is raising the eyebrows. They don't land at known civilian airports. They reportedly touch down at restricted, high-tech locations. Some say a secret base, maybe. Now ask the obvious question, who sent them? The reports point just at one direction, that is China. But you know why this moment is so sensitive? Because this moment comes at the exact time when the US-Iran tensions are peaking. American warships are moving closer. Washington is openly discussing regime pressure, and Iran is warning of retaliation as well.
China is no longer sitting quietly on the sidelines because it knows that it can't afford to lose any more of its oil and gas suppliers to the lawless military actions of the Israeli and US governments, which together have stupidly pushed the Chinese military juggernaut into a metaphorical corner, making military confrontation inevitable in the near future as a more assertive Beijing shows a willingness to confront Israel on diplomatic terrain today.
China is calling on Israel to halt its military strikes on Iran, warning of serious consequences if tensions continue to escalate. In a rare rebuke at the UN Security Council, Beijing condemned what it calls violations of Iranian sovereignty. Following Israel's Operation Rising Lion, a wave of preemptive strikes on Iranian nuclear and military sites, with retaliatory strikes already hitting Tel Aviv and Jerusalem, the risk of a broader Middle East conflict is rising. This may derail diplomatic efforts and strain global energy markets. Full analysis in the description. China is calling on Israel to halt its military strikes on Iran, warning of serious consequences escalate. In a rare rebuke at the UN Security Council, Beijing condemned what it calls violations of Iranian sovereignty. Following Israel's Operation Rising Lion, a wave of preemptive strikes on Iranian nuclear and military sites, with retaliatory strikes already hitting Tel Aviv and Jerusalem, the risk of a broader Middle East conflict is rising. This may derail diplomatic efforts and strain global energy markets.
It's for this reason Zionist-controlled media outlets are sounding the alarm for a likely war against China.
So the reason I suggest China has saved the day, John, is they have declared that they will destroy Israel if the United States and Israel attack Iran. So I believe this is the explanation why the attack didn't occur already last Friday. At the same time, the Epstein files were going to be released, and therefore there was no war to cover it, which meant the Epstein files got released anyway, and now they've got the full attention of the world, which they weren't intended to receive. Meanwhile, Scott Ritter drops a bombshell. The war in Iran cannot be won. Israel wants regime change in days. U.S. bases would be wiped out. Thousands of Americans could die. Trump knows it would destroy him politically. An excellent clip, John. Let's listen to Scott Ritter.
Why does Trump want to attack Iran?
He doesn't want to attack Iran. This is just Donald Trump's, folly. If he thought he could get away with it, if he thought he could pull a Venezuela, come in and do a quick strike and get the objectives. But the objectives that need to be gotten are regime change, and it has to happen quick. The Israelis have put Donald Trump on notice that if there is an attack against Iran, that it has to kill the regime, and it has to happen quickly, like 3 to 5 days, because Israel could absorb 700 Iranian ballistic missiles and no more. Israel doesn't want to absorb 700 missiles unless the price that they're paying by absorbing these missiles results in an outcome that has the theocracy eliminated and Iran eliminated as a threat. And so Donald Trump now is looking at it, and his military people are saying, can't do it, boss. Can't accomplish that. That mission cannot be accomplished. He's sending all the ballistic missile defense forces in the region. It's not enough. His experts are saying, boss, during that 12-day war, we had all the THAAD batteries and the Patriot 3 batteries integrated with the Arrow 3s, the David Slings, and the Aegis, and we couldn't stop the missiles. Now you're sending in resources to the Middle East that aren't nearly what we had to defend Israel, and you think they're going to defend our bases? Isn't going to happen, boss. If we go to war, they're going to take out our bases, and thousands of Americans are coming home in body bags. And we can't win this war. It's going to last forever. And Donald Trump, finally, his brain went, that means I lose the midterm. And now we come to the real crux of the problem. This is about American politics. Donald Trump's already in trouble because of Milwaukee. I mean, ICE is
in Minneapolis.
Minneapolis. I'm sorry. ICE has destroyed his credibility, and there's a good chance he's going to lose the House just on ICE alone.
Yeah, Scott Ritter nailed it. There's no way that the United States can succeed in a short period of time with Iran. That means Israel is going to take a pounding. I believe Iran itself already has the ability to destroy Israel, but with China weighing in, there's just no room for doubt about it. So Scott Ritter, I think, added the further piece of the puzzle and why we've had no attack on Iran yet. And I dare say with China's declaration, it may be that it's now been permanently put on the back burner. Meanwhile, all the Epstein revelations that were supposed to be smothered by war of the attack on Iran are out there and being widely read and discussed with horrified reactions. Here's second smartest guy in the world reporting. Epstein Files horror show. Millions of documents released exposing Bill Gates' STDs. Trivial. Pedos in government. Torture, rape, babies dismembered, murder, and other depravities. Yes. Truly terrifying fact patterns are now coming into even sharper focus. New World Order, Globe Pedo errand boy extraordinaire Bill STD Gates was planning with Jeffrey Epstein their PSYOP 19 scamdemic years before it was finally foisted on the world. And here you have a document of COVID-19 as a mass sacrifice. For many years now, this Substack, second smartest guy, has been describing the mass compliance and mass uptake of the modified mRNA slow-kill bioweapon vaccines as a mass ritual biosuicide. So yes, it all is a kind of socially engineered satanic mass sacrifice.
And it is to be expected that Big Pharma and their bankster partners in crime were all knowingly profiteering from the deadly vaccines and greater depopulation program, while also closely working with Epstein and Gates, as well as the CIA and Mossad, on a 20-year manufactured pandemic plan, starting with the PSYOP 19 scamdemic and ending with the dystopian Agenda 2030 Great Reset hell on earth. Epstein files reveal possible Bill Gates Epstein JP Morgan network for pandemic vaccine profiteering 2011. JP Morgan executive emails Jeffrey Epstein asking for guidance and structuring a Bill Gates linked donor advised fund. In those emails, Epstein pushes language about quote unquote additional money for vaccines and suggests creating a quote unquote offshore arm, especially for vaccines. In 2013, Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation briefing describes the Global Health Investment Fund targeting 5 to 7% financial returns on drug and vaccine development, backed by a 60% principal guarantee. 2015, the Gates Foundation corresponds with the International Peace Institute about pandemic preparedness discussions. IPI leadership, International Peace Institute, that is, had documented contact with Epstein.
January 2017, text messages from Epstein's phone described pandemic simulation as a professional credential while discussing potential placements in a Gates private office, pharmaceutical vaccine teams, and pandemic reinsurance roles. March 2017, an internal planning document from Bill Gates' private office, Big C3, lists strain pandemic simulation as a technical deliverable. The document was forwarded to Jeffrey Epstein, May 2017. An email thread involving Epstein, Bill Gates, and Boris Nikolic referenced pandemic as a key long-term funding area, October 2019. Event 201, co-hosted by the Gates Foundation, Johns Hopkins, and the World Economic Forum, simulates a novel coronavirus pandemic weeks before COVID-19 becomes public. The Epstein bomb.
In November of 2025, the U.S. Congress passed and President Trump signed the Epstein Files Transparency Act to release nearly 6 million pages of documents connected with Jeffrey Epstein, the convicted sex trafficker. Epstein worked for Israeli intelligence by implicating powerful members of Western elites in sexual crimes, then blackmailing them. After he was arrested a second time, he was murdered to keep him silent. On December 19th, 2025, the United States Department of Justice released the first tranche of several 100,000 documents, many of which were redacted and otherwise incomplete. On Friday, January 20th, 2026, the Department of Justice released about 3 million pages of documents. Once again, the documents are redacted. For one thing, we were told that images of murder and torture were not included. There are around 2.5 million more pages to go. Congressman Thomas Masik is demanding full, unredacted documents. He also claims that the unreleased files include indictments for serious crimes. These indictments need to be unsealed. People need to be prosecuted. Justice will not be done until billionaires are being perp-walked for sex crimes. Justice will not be done until those who even appeared to be doing something improper with Epstein are shunned and driven from public life.
The archive is searchable at the DOJ's Epstein library. You just have to certify you're over the age of 18. There are two things that must be borne in mind here. First, Jeffrey Epstein was a world-class networker. Thus, merely being mentioned in the Epstein files is not in itself evidence of illegal or immoral activity. Although after 2008, you can at least assume they had no problem associated with a convicted sex offender. And many members of America's elite, including people in the present admin, associated with Epstein after 2008. Second, many of the files that have been released come from FBI investigation, including tips phoned into the FBI. Inevitably, some of these people were crazy, others simply trying to taint the case with misinformation. Everything should be seasoned with a grain or two of salt. That said, if even 5% of what these files revealed is accurate, the Epstein bomb is big enough to blow up the American political establishment. And since Epstein was at the nexus of Jewish control over American politics, the Epstein bomb may be the beginning of the end of Jewish hegemony in America. Let's talk a bit about what the files reveal or confirm about Epstein and his friends. Then we can talk about crimes and misdemeanors.
First, Epstein was quite racist towards non-whites and most whites as well. Epstein had a strong Jewish identity. He thought Jews were superior to non-Jews, whom he held in contempt. But Jews are fine with racism as long as they are the master race. Race realism under Jewish hegemony Jewish hegemony, is simply used to cement that hegemony. Second, Epstein was a hyperactive sexual degenerate who was into underage white girls, which is rape. He didn't like to victimize or share black or brown girls. There is no mention of Asians either. The files contain explicit references to pedophilia and torture videos. There are also suspicious references to pizza and other food items, which the FBI recognizes as code words used by child sex traffickers. At the bottom, it is sad to think that in 100 years, the ADL, the Anti-Defamation League, will be arguing that this degenerate is simply a misunderstood victim of anti-Semitism. But remember, the ADL was created to protect Jewish pedophiles.
With regard to that word pizza in this context, among the emails released through WikiLeaks by Julian Assange was one reporting that Barack Obama had spent 65,000 taxpayer dollars to fly pizza and hot dogs from Chicago to the White House for a private party. In pedo language, pizza is a slang term for little girls, hot dogs for little boys. So what Obama had done was to fly at $65,000 taxpayer expense little boys and little girls from Chicago to the White House for a private party. It boggles the mind. Third, Epstein liked to share his underage prostitutes with other rich and powerful men, inculpating them in his crimes. This, of course, gave him the ability to blackmail his friends. Fourth, Epstein was involved in international politics and business. His closest ties were to Israel. He was probably working for Mossad. And I say, he appears to have been a Mossad asset as opposed to a Mossad agent, just as he appears to have been an asset for the CIA. One can't really read these files without forming the impression that America is ruled by a largely Jewish elite that sees us as subhuman and controls us through our vices, based on what I've seen so far, as well as what Massey and the Justice Department claim is being withheld. Quashed indictments, murder and torture images. The following people lied to the American people about the Epstein file: Donald Trump, Pam Bondi, Kash Patel, and Dan Bongino. Trump has claimed that the files exonerate him from misconduct and that claims to the contrary are a hoax.
Bondi has claimed that there is no evidence that Epstein or Maxwell were trafficking underage girls to anyone other than Epstein. Thus, there was no quote-unquote client list and no evidence of indictable third parties. Bongino made essentially the same statements. Patel testified under oath to the U.S. Senate that, quote, there was no credible information that Jeffrey Epstein trafficked women and underage girls to anyone but himself. We have released all credible information, unquote. He also claimed that there was, quote, no credible evidence, unquote, linking Epstein to a larger trafficking ring or blackmail of prominent individuals with no incriminating, quote, unquote, client list found. The client list, of course, is a red herring. If Epstein had clients, people he was introducing to underage prostitutes, then any competent investigator could make a list of suspects and then confirm them. 3 people who definitely belong on the suspect list are Bill Clinton, Andrew Mountbatten Windsor, and Bill Gates. And by the way, just editorially, people can look up Lord Mountbatten, his uncle. You can look that guy up. He was blown sky high by the IRA, but not before all of very, very similar crimes were discovered. Anyhow, but by insinuating the idea that Epstein himself had made a list which did not turn up, these people then went through the charade of an unsuccessful search for the list. But in fact, it was their job to create such a list. That's what we pay these people to do. Why didn't they do it? Because they were covering up for Epstein's clients like Clinton and Gates.
Meanwhile, the secret reports. Epstein represented Mossad and Rothschild banking empire while arranging honey traps and compromising control, high-level politicians, and power elites. Everything we expected to be in the Epstein files has turned out to be true, and then some. Allegations of rape, murder, even torture of children are all on full display in the millions of pages of documents released by the DOJ over the weekend. This is truly a we can do anything and get away with it statement by the billionaire globalist elites who run the world. They are Luciferian to the core. We can't drive out of our driveways without an expired tag or insufficient insurance coverage without facing stiff punishments. But they can get away with raping and abusing children and know they will suffer zero consequences. The Associated Press reported a top Justice Department official played down the possibility of additional criminal charges arising from the Epstein criminal files, saying Sunday that the existence of horrible photographs and troubling email correspondence does not allow us necessarily to prosecute somebody. It was almost exactly 1 year ago that many of the most well-known mega influencers posed outside the DOJ holding little white Epstein binders called the Epstein Files Phase 1. Those binders were, of course, devoid of any substantive information on Epstein or his network of billionaire pedophiles.
Now that an actual Epstein data dump has happened, most of those same influencers are silent. Those who have posted stories seem to be running for the administration, running cover for the administration. Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche all but stated in an interview with CNN that there will be no charges filed against anyone as a result of the documents that were released Sunday, even though they included images and statements that would make Charles Manson cringe.
Remember, President Trump called these files a hoax just a few months ago. I guess that could be the case if everything we've seen in the 3 million pages released was made up out of whole cloth. But we have victims out there who could and would testify against these monsters. Why isn't the DOJ willing to put them on a witness stand and go after the predators? Apparently, they are off limits. Meanwhile, meme of the day, as you probably know, I represent the Rothschilds. Epstein to Thiel in an email drop.
You said this is the end of the Epstein, of your review of the Epstein files. So just to clarify, is the public going to learn the identities of the men who abused the girls with the information that you're releasing? And if not, why not? And then I have a quick follow-up.
I mean, you just baked in an assumption into your question that I have never said and I don't know to be true. Is the public going to learn about men that abuse these girls? Like, what does that mean? I mean, I don't understand what that means.
Well, I mean, they're the men who abused the young women through Epstein's.
Look, we said in July, and it remains as true today as it was in July. If we had information, we meaning the Department of Justice, about men who abused women, we would prosecute them, right? We talked about the work that we're doing. That's why I said that. I said this earlier. There's this built-in assumption that somehow there's this hidden tranche of information of men that we know about that we're covering up or that we're choosing not to prosecute. That is not the case. I don't know whether there are men out there that abuse these women. If we learn about information and evidence that allows us to prosecute them, you better believe we will. But I don't think that the public or you all are going to uncover men within the Epstein files that abuse women, unfortunately.
And you want to remember Todd Blanche, who was saying, hey, what are you talking about the men who were involved? As though it were obscure. He's talking about identifying the predators. Remember, that guy is an attorney for Donald J. Trump. So, John, I don't think there's anything mysterious about what's going on. They're desperately trying to keep the cat from out of the bag, but it's too late, John, by a mile.
Well, a few cultural references as we wind things up. One of which you'll recall from Casablanca when the guy is caught stealing in the casino. I'm shocked. How dare you? I'm shocked that you caught me red-handed. How dare you impugn my authority? The authority of these men. How dare you? So anyway, that reference. But speaking of cats, we began the bumper music with McCafferty from the Broadway musical of the same name. I have a thought, and since I have the pleasure of your company this evening, Dr. Fetzer, a thought, and I'll bounce it off of you and see what you think about it. So here we have, and if you could just mute Dr. Fetzer for reverb. Here we have a man, Jeffrey Epstein, and he is hanging out with the Pope. He's hanging out with the so-called royal family in England. He's hanging out with all these creeps in Hollywood. He's running all of these rings. He has time in the day to send 1 million emails. He has the strength of 120-year-olds on Viagra. He can just constantly, in what we're being told, he can just constantly engage himself this way. He also, while doing so, has, as we've spoken on this series, a deformed penis. And this is a matter of court record by several women. He could not, in fact, sexually function, but he has the stamina of 100 Zeuses. He has all this financial interest. He has apartments in Manhattan. He's probably being pimped out by Ghislaine, who's above him in terms of control. He's plugged in with Israeli intelligence, this, that, and the other. All of this. This is the story. My thought is he a character? Is Jeffrey Epstein a character? And my thought is something I almost think about with Elon Musk, that these men exist. They have a certain role, and I'm not implying that sort of criminality with Elon Musk, but I'm saying the busyness is, if you had 100 or 200 hours in the day, I don't know how one man could do this. And here in Epstein is being told that he was doing this for years. I'm not saying there was no criminality whatsoever, or that he didn't have some irons in the fire. I almost wonder, and here's my point, and I'd like your thought on the matter. I almost wonder if Jeffrey Epstein is like a DBA, a doing business as. It's an umbrella term for a much larger operation. He's a face. He was allowed to do some mischief here and there, but a lot of criminality by maybe hundreds of people are just being put under this umbrella of Jeffrey Epstein, this character, this DBA almost. That's a thought. That's why I began with McCaffrey. What are your thoughts, Dr. Fetzer?
John, I think that's fascinating. That's a fascinating conjecture or speculation, and it could be true. I like it. I'm glad you got it out there. Coming up with ideas, hypotheses, theories is the hardest part in scientific reasoning. Once you get the hypothesis out there, you tend to be able to evaluate the evidence for and against. I like it, John. I think that's a valuable addition to the discussion and fully worthy of contemplation.
And I do believe we'll have plenty of time to contemplate, even though obviously, the story has lately expanded greatly with these emails compared to what it was a decade ago. I think we're just at the beginning of what implications this ring and this criminality had. I think we're just seeing the beginning ripples of what will happen.
John, I couldn't agree more. I think you're absolutely right. And I greatly value having these opportunities for us to converse on a weekly or so basis. It's wonderful, John.
Absolutely. It's an honor as well here, Dr. Fetzer. For the audience, here is Dr. Fetzer's site with all sorts of resources and many recordings Dr. Fetzer puts out there on so many platforms. And then here are the various books that his publishing house, Moonrock Books, has all sorts of more in-depth stuff. And we always want to get deeper into things, and Moonrock Books is your man for that. And so when all of that's seen to, you can head over to Apocatastasis and hear my ramblings on piety, meaning our devotion, the very old, ancient world-fashioned definition of piety, our devotion to our family and our polis, we'll say our city-state. Good. Anything you want to bring up, Dr. Fetz, as we kick off?
Oh, John, this is excellent. Much
Great.
Appreciated.
Yes,
Yeah.
sir.
Good job.
All right.
Good job.
Thank you to the audience. Thank you to Dr. Fetzer. And this is News with the Fetz, knocking off for China Saves the Day for the 7th of February. Farewell.